How's it going, everybody? It's SaltyTreecko, and today I'm going to be talking about sort of a leak, sort of not a leak. It's whatever. It's more speculation than a leak video, if you'd like to know what I'm referring to. This is a pretty old leak by Central Leaks, which is a pretty, I don't want to say necessarily reliable source, because I'm not too familiar with most of what they've done, but according to what I've seen, they're pretty reliable. And what we're going to be talking about today is that they stated multiple OP abilities got nerfed hard, like for example, some can only be activated once per battle now. And he mentioned that one of those is Zacian's Intrepid Sword. He also talked about Kyogre, but we're not going to be talking about that in this video. So this video is just going to be a quick little speculation video about what abilities I think this will apply to if it is real, how I think they're going to be nerfed, how I think would be best for them to be nerfed, and then just some other abilities I think are overpowered, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did get nerfed, and honestly I'd kind of like them to be nerfed. Real quickly, I'd also like to say thank you for all the support I got on the last video where I did a little bit introspective discussion on the Hisui forums. If you want to watch that video, there will be a card on screen now. I just want to say thank you for having that video perform as well as it did, and honestly, from that video performing so well, I'm pretty damn close to being able to be monetized now. And even though I obviously don't do this for the money, because I've been making videos for like 3 years now and haven't been monetized, it honestly is really nice to be able to get rewarded for making content. So I do really appreciate that. If you want to help out, make sure to drop a like and subscribe, and yeah, whatever, we'll get back to the video now. So starting off, he specifically mentioned that Zacian is on the chopping block. So what Intrepid Sword does is on switch in, every time you switch in, this Pokemon's attack gets raised a stage, so it means you pretty much automatically get a choice band. And on top of that, you can also run choice band on regular Zacian, or if you run Zacian Crowned, you just get a steel type and then you get the additional stat boost. Both of them were actually banned from Ubers quite a while ago to join the Anything Goes club, because their just typing move pool abilities were just completely broken, and they cut the ban hammer just like Mega Ray. So what I think, or what the leak implies this would be, is that they would change it so that instead of every time the Pokemon switches in getting the +1 to its attack, it would only happen once per battle. And I think this is definitely a reasonable way to nerf it, because it makes this Pokemon like the same immediate strength, but then you have to play better around it, because you have to consider when you want to switch in to get that +1, because if you switch in at a bad time, then if you switch it out and switch it in later, you don't get the same benefit of having that additional power. So I think it not only makes it a bit more of it obviously tones down the ability more, makes it more fair and balanced, and it also adds an additional layer of thought to play. So I think that by what the leak implies, that's the most likely balance. I think what would be a more balanced approach to just taking the ability and just making it slightly more balanced is having sort of something similar to Yveltal and Xerneas' abilities. So Yveltal has Dark Aura and Xerneas has Fairy Aura, and what happens there is that it boosts their stab moves, or not only just their stab moves, it boosts all Dark and Fairy type moves that are happening on the field by 1.33, I believe. So I think what might be a fair approach to this is saying, instead of just giving it an automatic +1 attack, instead of that, just have like something similar to Fairy or Dark Aura, where it just boosts the power of its attacks by 1.5 is obviously way too powerful, as we've seen. I think 1.33 is still a little obscene for the fact that it boosts not only just its stab moves, but all of its moves, so I think 1.25 would be a more fair modifier for Zacian. I don't think that's what's going to happen, as I think what's more likely is, as the leak implies, it'll just happen once and be over. So as far as Zacian, I think that's really all that's going to happen. It'll still be really good in Ubers, because obviously, even outside of its ability, it's an extremely powerful mon with Choice Band, plus it gets Swords Dance and has insane coverage. So Zacian definitely won't be asked from this. I also think this will also apply to Zamazenta, sadly. Which, who knows, maybe that means Zamazenta Crown's gonna be an OU now. God, I can't even imagine that. But anyway, now I'm gonna move on to talking about some Pokemon with abilities similar to Intrepid Sword and how I feel like that will be dealt with. The first one I have on here is Genesect. The sample set I just have is the one that pretty much got it banned from OU in Gen 8, which is just the choice banned U-turn spamming set. Now, Genesect definitely deserved to be banned from OU, and I feel like if download were to be nerfed, it definitely would tone it down enough where I think Genesect might definitely be useful in OU. Apologies. Download is an ability that either it raises your special attack or attack by one stage, depending on your opponent's defense. So, for example, if you bring in Genesect against like a Blissey or something, its defense is significantly lower than its special defense, so it'll boost your attack. And it's similarly, if you bring it in against like an Aggron or something, which has lower special attack than attack, it raises its special attack. So, what this means for Genesect is that I think it'll likely get the similar treatment to Zacian, where it will just happen once, and then it won't happen at all any other time in the game. Which I think really sucks for Genesect, because that means you have to switch it in like in even more specific circumstances. So for example, if you're running the physical set, you really have to switch it in against a Pokemon where you want to get the +1, because otherwise you're getting the special attack boost, and that really doesn't do shit for you. Similarly, if you're running like the set that got a ban from Gen 5, which is like a Rock Polish special set, if you're switching it in and get the attack boost, like shit, your ability practically did nothing for you at all. So I feel like Genesect, if download does end up getting nerfed and it does get brought back, I feel like Genesect might even be a contender for OU, and honestly, I think it might not even be that well, no, it'll still be good in OU, but I don't think there'll really be any debate over whether or not it'll be banned, because, I mean, if the point is to bring it in and spam U-turn, if you're not always perpetually getting that +1 boost on top of your choice band, like, it really just kind of makes this Pokemon a faster Scizor. And we've seen that currently in Gen 8 OU, Scizor isn't too powerful right now. Is it UU actually? Let's find out. Scizor, yeah, Scizor's even UU. So I think, you got a little bit of spoiler there at the end of the team. But, I think this Pokemon could definitely be OU and be solid in OU and not overpowered. So, I feel that it won't get a similar treatment to Zacian if they do end up giving it just like a slight boost. I'm not sure, honestly. I think it really all depends on what happens with Zacian if they do just have it activate once a turn. But I feel like this Pokemon will still be... If they do make it so that it's more of like an aura type thing, where when it switches in it either gets like the 1.25 boost to its attack or special attack, I feel like it'll still be a little too powerful for OU. But I feel like if they do just make it so download only... It does what it normally does, and then it only happens once, I feel like this Pokemon will potentially be an OU. And moving on, Blaziken is also a Pokemon that has very similar ability in Speed Boost. And I'm sure everyone here knows what Speed Boost does, but just in case, at the end of your turn it raises your speed by one stage, and it does this perpetually until you can't do it anymore or you die. So, Blaziken with Speed Boost, honestly, I feel like it wouldn't do too much harm to Blaziken if it only got one speed boost. Because Blaziken generally isn't a Pokemon you're bringing in more than once in a game. Usually it's a one and done type deal, like you bring it in, you SD, or you protect, you get your speed boost, and then you start hitting things until you die. And Blaziken really doesn't need more than +1 speed to outspeed a lot of Pokemon. It does make it really susceptible to revenge killers with Choice Scarf, but honestly, if you're running a defensive Blaziken set, I don't know, it really depends with Blaziken. Speed Boost is an ability where I feel like it really makes Blaziken from being a pretty mediocre Pokemon to being, well, it's still a pretty mediocre Pokemon, but can we talk about how bad Blaziken fell? I know this has been kind of talked into the ground, but Blaziken really went from being Ubers every single generation, now it's like goddamn UUBL, like that's so sad. It's so sad that Blaziken fell from glory so much, and not even by getting nerfed, it just fell out of favor, which is really sad to me. But I think Speed Boost Blaziken wouldn't get hindered too much. I feel like you definitely have to be more careful about your the opponent's revenge killers. So I feel like if Pokemon like Scarf, I don't really know, Scarf anything fast, like Scarf Kartana for goddamn sake. I feel like if those Pokemon are still in the battle, Blaziken is going to have a tougher time deciding like what it needs to do to come in. It'll have less opportunities to do what it needs to do. But I feel like if you can remove potential threats for Blaziken, I feel like it can still be equally as good. I feel like it'll definitely be significantly worse, but I don't know. I feel like it might even be able to knock it down to being UU viable and not busted, just because it makes it a lot easier to revenge kill. But I guess we'll kind of have to see as far as Blaziken. And now we have Kartana, and Kartana's just kind of my placeholder for every single Beast Boost Pokemon. I feel like Beast Boost will be a scenario where if they're going to nerf it, I feel like it'll be a scenario where it only happens once per game. And I feel like you really can't do anything with just nerfing how much gets boost. I feel like that really wouldn't be a very realistic scenario for what happens to the Beast Boost Pokemon. So I feel like obviously having Beast Boost drop your shit so significantly, or only boost once, I don't really know why I said it like that, I apologize. I feel like it doesn't do too much for hindering Pokemon, because the thing is, if you think about what happens with Beast Boost Pokemon, most of the time is, if you're going to sweep, is you kill something, you get your boost, the opponent brings out a weakened counter, which you can kill with your boost, and then the rest of the team you're able to sweep through. And honestly, I don't feel like this will change too much about them. I think Blacephalon is a great example of this, because the thing with Blaze is that if you have your counters low enough, if you get your +1 special attack, if you can knock out your counter, even if you don't get more than that, like, additional +1 special attack, pretty much everything else is dying to your stabs anyway, because you're just so goddamn powerful, and you still have that +1. So I really don't think this will do too much to hinder the offensive Pokemon. For example, Kartana. Like, think about what Kartana does in the game. If you have your Kartana out and your opponent has 4 more Pokemon, if you SD up on it, and then you kill the counter, you don't need those additional boosts to your attack. Those other Pokemon are fucking dying anyway. It doesn't matter how many boosts you have. It doesn't matter if you're +2 or if you're +50,000, those Pokemon are dying regardless. It's just overkill. So I feel like if Beast Boost does get nerfed to only happen once, I feel like what might happen is we might see more Kartanas running their speed boosting set. If you don't know how to run speed boosting Kartana, basically what you do is you give it you decrease its IVs a decent amount, and you give it, instead of the -2 like special attack or something, you just put it into your attack instead. And then you can put, I believe it's, 19 IVs instead of 31 into attack, and this will make it so that you can Sword Stance on it, instead of fucking Sacred Sword, we'll just slap Sword Stance on here, just as a sample set. This will make it so that you can still boost up with Sword Stance, still have ridiculously high attack as Kartana, even with a minus attack nature and not max IVs. After an SD, you're still hitting fucking 716 special attack, which is like, or not special attack, which is still like insanely powerful, and then you can still run like a boosting item on top of it, and then you're getting the +1 speed. So I think speed boosting Kartana might be a little more viable. I feel like maybe Calm Mind Blaze with the speed boosting set might be a little more popular. So overall, I don't think Beast Boost getting nerfed will hinder the Ultra Beast too much. I feel like some of the lower tier Ultra Beast will get hurt more than the higher tier ones. So for example, I think Pokemon like the fucking fat one, I don't remember what it's called, a Guzzlord, Xurkitree, I feel like those are Pokemon that might get hurt a little bit more by this. But like I mentioned, I feel like Cart, Blaze, Buzzwole, I can't really imagine those Pokemon getting too knocked down in viability from a nerf. The last one I want to talk about is Landorus, Therian, and pretty much all Intimidate Pokemon. Now, Intimidate's an ability they have tried to nerf in the past, and to some extent they succeeded. For example, I don't remember if it was this generation or last generation, I'm pretty sure it was Gen 8. They didn't directly nerf Intimidate, but what they did was that they buffed some other abilities, such as Inner Focus, to be immune to Intimidate, so it affects less Pokemon, and a lot less physical attackers will be affected by it. But I feel like Intimidate is a Pokemon that, it just really, like, Landorus Therian is such a great Pokemon, but I feel like most of it is in part because of Intimidate, giving it so much defensive utility. Because if you think about Landorus, look at its stats, like, 90 HP and 90 defense is good defensively, but it's nothing, like, shocking or out of the ordinary. There's a lot of Pokemon that have defensive stats like this. And while its defensive typing is good, if you don't have Intimidate to knock opponents' physical attack down, this Pokemon really suffers a lot from that. And honestly, Lando Serene, it's not a Pokemon I think it's going to ever drop to UU anytime soon, even if Intimidate does get nerfed to only happen once a battle. But Jesus Christ, this Pokemon will be so much worse. Definitely will go from being a complete metagame staple on like 70% of teams to, I don't know, maybe 30 or something. There's a lot of Pokemon with Intimidate, to mention a few. There's like Salamence, like Crocodile, I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but Gyarados, there we go. But Intimidate being nerfed to only happen once, I feel like will make a lot of defensive Pokemon that really rely on Intimidate a lot worse. For example, I think defensive Salamence sets will kind of drop off. I feel like Landorus has enough sets where it doesn't really matter if its defensive set is a little bit worse. I think it'll still be able to be used a lot anyway. But I think Intimidate nerfed might be one of the biggest nerfs in Pokemon history, just because Intimidate is so good, and there are so many battles where Intimidate is used where it'll just have such a big impact on the metagame. I feel like a similar thing that I talked about for like the different auras could be applied to like Pokemon with Landorus that have Intimidate, where instead of having a positive boost, it could just be like a 0.8 multiplier or 0.75 multiplier instead. I feel like this would also be more of a nerf than it implies, because it would only happen when Landorus is on the field. So for example, if Landorus switches into something, gets the Intimidate, switches out, the opponent no longer has the reduction to their attack. So I feel like that would be a more reasonable way to nerf it, instead of having it apply once. But once again, do I think that's going to happen? No, I think more realistically it's just going to be able to happen once and then not again for the rest of the battle. I do kind of wish Intimidate worked like the other way I suggested though, where it's just more of an aura thing. But I understand that Intimidate is also really busted in doubles, and I can completely understand if the Pokemon Company just kind of wants to nerf the shit out of Intimidate. I really wouldn't blame them. Next, that's really all of the attack or defense or whatever the hell boosting abilities, and now I want to talk about just some other abilities that might get affected by having abilities only proc once per battle. The first I want to talk about is weather-inducing abilities like Drizzle, like Drought, and like Sandstorm. Or not Sandstorm, Sandstream, my bad, and also I'm going to drink water, apologize for that. I think weather is already sort of niche as it is. I think it's really unreliable and matchup dependent, and I feel like if the weathers get changed to only happen once per game, I feel like weather will really drop the face off the map. It'll go from being niche to just being dog shit, like Trick Room. Trick Room is bad, kids don't use it. I really don't think there's too much future for weather if abilities like Drizzle and Sandstream and those get nerfed. I feel like this will also really affect Pokemon that have Sandstream specifically. So Pokemon like T-Tar and Hippowdon, I feel like those will really be severely hindered by Sandstream getting nerfed, especially Tyranitar, because it really relies on the Spadef boost to be useful in OU right now. I feel like Hippowdon may be a little bit less, because it's still really bulky even without Sand. Sand is just nice for it to be able to chip the opponent down. But I still feel like weather in general will just be practically non-existent in competitive. I think weather in general has always been something that was more really suited to the casual play, to the main gameplay of the game, and not competitive play. I feel like competitive was always just sort of like a side thought when they were talking about weather. So I think this is, I don't want to say a good change, but I feel like this is a change that kind of goes more along with what the developers had in mind when they initially put weather into the game. Because if you think about it, weather's kind of always been getting nerfed, especially in Gen 5 when people realized weather, like, holy shit, this is fucking broken. But even back in like Gen 3, like, T-Tar's been freaking busted for literally forever because of Sand. So I really don't have too much other to say if weather gets nerfed. I don't think it'll be necessarily a bad change. I feel like it'll make teams that rely on weather obviously significantly worse, but I feel like weather teams in general are really just kind of all or nothing teams, like kind of matchup dependent, kind of uncompetitive as well. So I'd personally be definitely okay with Weather getting nerfed. Moving on, I'm going to talk about the Tapus and specifically their Surge abilities, which summon Terrain. I don't think this is a... Yeah, I'm going to say it. I don't really think this is an ability and collection of abilities I think are likely to be nerfed, especially because from Gen 7 to Gen 8 they were nerfed, because they made the respective moves significantly weaker. For example, Lele's, I think it got nerfed from like 1.5 to 1.3 or 1.2, so I really can't imagine this gets nerfed again. But once again, I similarly to Weather, I feel like Terrain is something that definitely has a lot more of an impact on games, and I feel like if it only happens once, I feel like the Tapus will just be significantly worse. For example, Tapu Fini having the ability to switch in and have Misty Terrain summon to be able to make it immune to things like Toxic and Will-O-Wisp, I think that really just helps it so much throughout the game and helps it just be so much more of a viable Pokemon than if it were only procced once. I think Coco really doesn't care too much about Electric Terrain. It's just kind of a nice thing that boosts its Thunderbolts, because Sleep doesn't happen too much in games, but I guess now that Breloom's coming back, I guess Coco and its Electric Terrain could be really nice for preventing Spore. But I really don't think Electric Surge and all the other Surge abilities will get nerfed because, like I said, they were recently nerfed. And that really concludes the abilities I think might get nerfed if the other abilities get nerfed to happen once a match. Now I'm going to talk just briefly about some abilities that I personally think are overpowered and I would like to see be nerfed. The first, obviously, is Regenerator. This does also kind of go in with the other Pokemon having their abilities nerfed to happen once per match. I think if Regenerator gets nerfed to happen once per match, that will be the best fucking decision any company has ever made regarding their game balance ever. Fuck Regenerator, dude. Holy shit, Regenerator is the fucking lamest ability to ever happen in Pokemon ever. As you can tell, I really don't like the ability Regenerator. I think it kind of makes defensive play a little brainless, and I think Regenerator is part of the reason why Stall is not only so good, but so frustrating to play against, because having your opponent, like, being able to get them to low health, and then they switch out and switch in, and they're fucking back, it's just so frustrating to play against, and it's just so lame, and really kind of uncompetitive. And full Regenerator pivot teams like with Pex, like Regenerator Tornadus and Regenerator Tangrowth, they're just so goddamn lame, dude. They're so boring to play against, they're really boring to play with, and I feel like they're really just bad and toxic for the nature of competitive play. And I feel like this ability getting nerfed to only happen once per game, I feel like that would be really, really fantastic. But honestly, I feel like even a nerf, like just knocking it down from 1/3 to like 25%, like, just Regenerator needs to be nerfed in some way. And no matter how it gets nerfed, I feel like it'll be beneficial for competitive play. Just like the nature of it, how fun it is to play, and how competitive it is. I think Regenerator being nerfed is just fantastic, tremendous, literally salivating at the thought of it. Moving on from my anti-Regenerator rant. Also, I don't think if a Regenerator gets nerfed, I don't think Pex is going to be UU. I think it still has the tools to be OU despite it. Anyway, moving on, I think Static also kind of needs a bit of a nerf. This also applies to abilities like Flame Body. I think Contact gets punished a little bit too much in competitive play. And I think Static and Flame Body are kind of part of those reasons. So I'd like to see it be a little more luck-based for whether or not you get Static or Flame Bodied, so I think a 4th is kind of more balanced. Similarly to Scarlet, I feel like Scarlet is a little too safe to throw out, because if you're throwing it out, you're just getting a burn. It's pretty damn likely you're going to get a burn. So I feel like with abilities like Static and Flame Body as well, I feel like the thing is, if you hit a Pokemon with Static or Flame Body, sometimes you have to hit that Pokemon with the move. Because if you think about a Zapdos, if it's at 40% health and you have your physical mon in, if you switch out, that Zapdos is going to get a free roost and it's going to be back. So the thing is, it's in your best interest to hit that Pokemon. And then if you get Static, like, you're just kind of fucked. So I feel like you have to play around Static and Flame Body a little bit too much. if that makes sense. I don't really know if any of this is making sense. But the point is, I feel like there's too much... You know, I'm just gonna end it at that. I feel like you have to play around these abilities too much, and I feel like if you decreased the percent chance of having it happen, like even down to 20%, I feel like it makes it more of a give and take, like you have to sort of play around the ability, but if you have to hit them, like, it's okay, like, it's still just unlucky if you get hit. It's not like, if you hit it and you get static, like, well, shit, yeah, it was gonna fucking happen anyway, eventually. Especially with Pokemon like Zapdos that have roosts that can stay around forever, and you're going to be getting hit with the physical attack like a shit ton throughout the game. Moving on, I'm going to be talking about another extremely toxic and uncompetitive ability, which is Serene Grace. I'm not going to talk about it too much. We all know how annoying Serene Grace is. We all know how annoying Jirachi and Togekiss are. Just, instead of doubling it, have it like 1.5 or something. I'm not even going to talk about it more. I'm just going to say that. Serene Grace is fucking stupid. Nerf it, please. Next we have a double feature of Clef, which I'm talking about Unaware and Magic Guard. I think Unaware is a little less unfair than Magic Guard, so I'll talk about it a little more briefly. I think Unaware is a little bit too powerful of an ability. I'm not sure if it's overpowered, but I think it is really, really strong, and if it were nerfed, I wouldn't be too sad. I think a more fair way to nerf this would be, instead of having it happen once, obviously that would just be fucking stupid. I think having it be, like, it just takes half of whatever the damage, or the stat change would be. So for example, if you have a Crawdaunt, you bring it in, you get +2, and then you get hit with a Crab Hammer, it only affects it if it were like +1. I feel like that's a little bit more fair of a way to balance out Unaware, and I'm not going to talk too much more about it because I don't think that's likely to happen. As far as Magic Guard goes, I feel like a good way to nerf it, because Magic Guard is a really fucking good ability, one of the best in the game, potentially top 3, potentially top 5, depending on how you think about it. I feel like a good way to nerf it would be, instead of taking no damage from indirect attacks, only have it take like half damage from direct attacks. For example, like if you have a Clef and you switch it out on Stealth Rocks, instead of taking 12.5, it takes 6.25. Same thing with Spikes. For like poison damage, it just halves the poison damage. I feel like that would be a fair way to keep Magic Guard good, because it would still be a good ability, it just wouldn't be overpowered. I remember there was some reason why I was thinking why this wouldn't work, but I don't quite remember what it was. If I do remember, I'll put it in the pinned comment, but I really don't remember what it was, so that's all I have to say about Magic Guard. Moving on, I'm going to talk about Dharma and Guerrilla Tactics. This is a really easy one to talk about. It's kind of really just too fucking strong. Like, just make it a lower multiplier. That's honestly all I really have to say about Dharma. And moving on to a more interesting one, the Pokemon the moves... I can't fucking talk. The ability that change your typing and stab. So this applies to Greninja as well if it comes back. I'm really not sure how this would get changed, if at all. I think it's pretty safe to say that Protean and Libero are very, very powerful abilities. It got Cinderace banned to Ubers. I'm really not sure how this would get nerfed, and I hate to end on a blue ball like that, but I don't know, maybe... I think maybe a decent way to nerf these would be have it so that you switch types, but you don't get the full stab boost. So normal stab is 1.5 multiplier, so maybe just you get a 1.33 multiplier on your stab instead, so that would tone it down a little bit while still keeping with the spirit of the ability. So I think that's really all I have to talk about today. Let me know if there are any abilities you would like to see nerfed that I haven't talked about. Let me know if you think I'm fucking stupid. Let me know if you think there are any better ways to nerf these abilities. Let me know if I'm just a little baby and Stall isn't overpowered at all and I just suck and blah blah blah. You can play around it if you just play correctly all of the 1,000 turns it takes to complete a battle. If you have any other comments, let me know down in the description. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to smash a like and subscribe, and that's it.